we should be good to go. And I will pass it over to Erin to get us started for tonight.
Awesome. Thank you, Melissa, for running through those great Women Who Code messages from Women Who Code Global. We're so excited to be a part of this meetup and sharing some of our experiences tonight. So, I mean, yeah, you have our pictures here and everything, but I think we can probably go ahead and get started. Yeah, in the spotlighted version. So yeah, if you don't have to share the whole time, but oh, nice. Okay. So before we jump in, I did want to see if everyone could actually answer the warm-up question. It was kind of as people were joining, but we would love to see this before we start so that we can kind of swing back to it at the end of the meetup. But if everyone could post something really small, quick, like what you're hoping to learn or what you're hoping to hear about in tonight's panel around product and tech. If you could just to kind of get us warmed up as well, get our minds ready, that would be awesome. If you could just throw them into the chat. Give everyone a few minutes and then we'll do intros. Some lingo and jargon, awesome. And we will have time for Q&A at the end. So this is a little prep for that. How to bridge communication between business and tech. Awesome. How product peeps can better work with tech, effective collaborative tools and strategies, tech and business to stop fighting each other. Best communicate technical requirements to my PO. Awesome. SDLC challenges. Great. How to feel like one team aligning. Awesome. When should you engage developers during product discovery or grooming? I think we'll touch on that. Solving prioritization differences between tech and product. That's a good, meaty subject. What have you found to be the biggest obstacles bridging the gap? Yeah. These are great. Awesome. Thank you guys. Thanks so much for putting some ideas in there, getting us all ready. So I will introduce myself a bit more here. I'm Erin Geoghan. I'm a managing software consultant with Ippon. I've been in software for 6 years now, with Ippon for just about 2.5. And I do a wide variety. I've done back-end work, some front-end work, a little bit of DevOps. So kind of this and that. My favorite coding language is JavaScript. Beats out Java by just a little bit there. And I have been a manager with Ippon for a little over a year now. So doing some people management as well. Been on a couple different clients with Ippon. So lots of different experiences. I currently live in Richmond, in Carytown South. I love the neighborhood I live in. And I live here with my husband and 2 dogs, which are a big part of my work life now, as they often come in. I think they're completely gated out right now, but yeah, they're people I work with often see them kind of running around in this area. So I also wanted to quickly note, we'll continue doing intros. Everybody on this panel is from Ippon, but each of these speakers has very unique career paths and experiences. I think something that makes consulting so unique is that even at the same company, all of us go off onto our own projects, sometimes get to work together, sometimes not. So we each have seen very different cultures and experience challenges. Some we can find patterns across clients, others are unique. So you're definitely getting a wide range of inputs here tonight. And so I'm excited to kind of talk about how these two particular arms of the delivery life work together between product and tech. So we'll do a quick intro, and then our first question is really more into everybody's background. But let's go down the line here and start with Hayley.
Hi, good evening, everybody. My name is Hayley Ortega. I'm the product practice lead here at Ippon USA, and I've been with Ippon about 1.5 years now. And yeah, currently I'm on a project, a fintech client doing product consulting. I also manage a team of product managers and help grow the business here at Ippon. And when I'm not working, I am enjoying the outdoors with my husband and 2 young sons. I'm so happy to be here and talk with you all. And I'll pass it over to Christina.
Hey everyone, I'm Christina Annis. I work at Ippon, where I am a managing software engineer. I've been at Ippon just a little bit over 1 year, and currently I'm on a project with a risk analysis client doing kind of a mix of software and data. And I live in city center of Richmond with my partner and my 2 dogs. And it's really wonderful to be here with y'all. Ramya.
Hey everyone, I'm Ramya Shetty. I am a data consultant and a manager in the data practice at Ippon. I've been with the company for 3 years now, and right now I'm working with a fintech client. I live in Glen Allen with my husband and my 2-year-old son, who you will probably hear or see soon.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So now we can go back around and kind of give everybody, I know a big part of Women Who Code is networking and getting to know how people, I think Melissa mentioned this even in the beginning. How did you come into the tech scene? How did you come to the role that you're in right now? Just sort of what your career path was. You want to start with Christina?
Sure. So my origin story for tech starts in Richmond at University of Richmond. I started with a laser focus on physics, but then while I was there, that kind of broadened to math and computer science. And all of that applied to science. Sorry if you can hear him upstairs, all working from home. And so the part that I really loved about that was translating between different domains. And I think that's why product and tech together appeals to me so much, is because you're doing that same kind of translation between domains. So after I left UR, I went and worked for the Navy. I started by testing in a very established environment, and then moved on to a development role on a more kind of R&D warfare simulation product. And in that second environment, I was a developer, but I also kind of wore the Scrum Master hat sometimes and the business analyst hat sometimes. And I think kind of embracing all of those different roles on a team and that flexibility is kind of what I was really hoping to bring to consulting. Ramya, why don't we hear from you?
Sure. For me, I've worked with data for over 10 years across different verticals, like right from online advertising to CPG to insurance and now financial services. And just it's been great working with data across all these different industries and having like different business users and business groups to work with. I feel I got really lucky having my first project as a consultant be a data one, because I liked it so much I've never left. Yeah, I kind of moved through the roles of like something similar to you, like started off in testing, moved to development, a little bit of a tech lead role. So it's been, really gratifying to be in this career. Hayley.
So me, so yeah, I've been in like financial services, like majority of my career, like mortgage and credit card services mainly. But yeah, I started as a sales assistant or operations manager in the mortgage department for a big bank, and then sort of worked my way up. I got into project management, operations project management. And then with the Agile transformation, I got the opportunity to roll into a product manager role. And yeah, I think it's definitely my calling. Like when I look back at all sort of the roles that I've done throughout my career, I was kind of always a problem finder, but in a good way. Like I was always looking for those opportunities and like trying to drive improvements and things like that. So being a product manager now, I get to like full-time, you know, work on solving problems and partner with engineering partners to just create solutions and solve problems. So it's great. I'm really happy here doing what I'm doing.
Thanks. Match made. Awesome. Thanks, everyone. So I have 4 questions to go through this evening with you guys. And then after that, like I said, we would love to field some questions from the group. And possibly informed by what you hope to hear out of this evening. If you didn't hear, I'm sure somebody here will have something to comment on at the end if anyone has stuff to add. So all of the questions kind of fall under the umbrella of of product and tech and their interactions. And I know someone mentioned understanding jargon at the beginning. And so definitely if there are any, I will define some terms, but if there's anything you hear that we're talking about and you have a question on, go ahead and throw that in the chat and I or Melissa can see that and we can answer it. We definitely will go through the questions first and then do Q&A, but it can be a little interactive as we go so that everyone, you know, feels present. So this first question I have is around laying out a roadmap and what your techniques are. So kind of to lay out a scenario for you three, big piece of intent comes in and it's not really that well defined, but it's sort of thrown onto your team's lap, like, hey, we really need X to happen. And your more junior engineers will definitely need a bit more clarity before they can even think about putting their hands on a keyboard to solve this problem. So in your role, share a technique or just an experience around this, where you've been able to kind of take a pretty vague piece of business requirement and start delivering on it. Anyone can start on this one.
I'll go first because yeah, I think this happens like all the time, right? Pretty much. And it's actually one of my favorite parts of the job is like getting into that gray space or like those vague sort of needs and then diving in and figuring out what it really means and what we really need to solve for and then coming up with a plan and going for it. But a technique that I like to use is just like, I call it a design sprint. And it can really range from just a couple of days to like up to 2 weeks, but it's really just getting product, tech, designers if needed, and users like together to talk through the intent and like really get grounded on what are you solving for. And some may view it as like too much of an upfront investment, but my opinion is that you either spend that time upfront or you're going to spend it and maybe even more time like throughout your sprint trying to figure out what you're building while you're building it or change the tires while the car is moving. And it's just not a great experience. So I prefer to like kind of stop, take that dedicated time, really figure out what are we solving for, why, and like come up with a blueprint of, okay, here's what we need to go solve for. And then you can chip away at that and like refine it piece by piece, but at least you have a blueprint and like a great starting place.
Cool. Yeah, that definitely makes sense. Anyone else have thoughts on that?
Yeah, I completely agree that getting everyone in a room at the beginning is very important. My big experience with kind of, a big thing coming in and getting it to the end has been in that warfare simulation application I talked about earlier. We had a small number of users and they were all super users. And so they all understood the application very well, and maybe not quite as well as they thought that they did. So they would come to us and be like, we need you to do this. And we'd be like, okay. And there were a few times where we did that and then got finished doing it, and it did not solve the problem that they had. So we had to kind of change our approach, working with our users to say, okay, I hear you, you need this. Let's take it back into problem space and just reason it out all the way there before we move into solution space. And that made a really big difference with that team to figure out the true need and then move on to the technical solution.
Awesome.
I really like both of those, and appreciate that kind of upfront investment in trying to figure things out. I think one thing that helped me at a recent client when we were kind of facing a similar scenario was just having like intermediate check-ins, not necessarily waiting all the way to sprint demo, but maybe having like an informal check-in, maybe through Slack, just sharing some, hey, this is some in-progress results, just to kind of make sure, that we're on the right track. And that, I feel that kind of helped establish confidence both, for the delivery team, like as well as the business user, that yes, we're still on the same page, and we are on the right track to kind of deliver what we need to. So that really kind of helped gain momentum for us.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, and like going off of that kind of common example of, hey, we want X, but upon further discovery, you might find out, well, if you, and that's what my big thing when there's a big piece of intent coming in is why. And any product person that I've ever worked with knows this, is I want to know, like, down to the detail why this requirement is here, because ultimately I can't do my job and deliver working software for you if I don't know the root reasoning why. And so sometimes it's we want X, but it's because of Q. And so if I look at Q and say, well, let me see what we have software wise, and then realize, for Q, you really want Y. We can also do X, but you might want Y up front. That can, kind of change things. So my biggest thing is always, start asking why until you get to that root reasoning. Awesome. Thanks, everybody. So this next question, and this kind of flows from what we were talking about. So like, once you have identified the why and you're kind of in the throes of things, this word is around refinement. And I think Hayley mentioned in her response too. I just want to highlight that quickly and kind of quickly define it. Refinement is an Agile ceremony, but whether your team works with Agile or not, it's sort of like, we can define it tonight as the time where your team meets to review requirements. Essentially, you're planning some sort of planning meeting, looking at your list of work or backlog or whatever you want to call it. That's and the time to get clarifying criteria on what you should be delivering. So for some people that might be in very scheduled Agile ceremonies every sprint. Other times it might be, your 20 minutes at the end of the day. So I know everyone works differently. So it's just kind of try and picture that time of your delivery life cycle getting clarifying criteria. So in your three's experience, what would you say are like your top two tenets of refinement to ensure that it's successful and your team gets what they need in order to move forward?
Yeah, so I think as a product manager, refinement is key to making sure things go well. And for me, I believe like good preparation is what makes for a good refinement session. So like I don't just show up for a refinement session. Like, I'm doing preparation before that. I'm looking ahead at the backlog of like, what are the next set of priorities that we need to refine? I'm taking the time to draft the acceptance criteria and really think about the why and the scenarios and like get acceptance criteria drafted up. I'm also trying to think about what additional stakeholders we might need in that refinement session to answer questions that come up, so that we're able to make decisions in the session and actually come out with finalized stories. So yeah, so inviting extra people that might need to be there. And yeah, also, you know, for me, as part of refinement is just getting the team's input. So yes, I go in with draft acceptance criteria, but then it's just a very collaborative discussion with the team about the needs, right? And then about some additional scenarios, and do we need to break this up depending on like how big is it, what's it going to take to deliver it? So, but yeah, I try and do some preparation up front to try and set the meeting up for success.
Awesome. What about from the developer's point of view for a successful refinement session?
So I have a pet peeve to share, but then I'll also share a couple of ways of getting around the pet peeve.
Yeah.
One thing that I sometimes find frustrating is leaving a refinement session with each thing that needs to be done being understood really well, but only by one person. And like, I totally get that sometimes people are more familiar with different parts of the application, and it makes sense to have one person really dive deep in one place. But I think it does kind of introduce risk, right? Like if Brian really knows the, X part, but Brian's not here next week to do this big improvement on X part, then we're kind of up a creek because no one else is as familiar or is able to take this on in the stage of detail that it's been described in so far. So that doesn't all need to happen, right, with all the other stakeholders in the room. They're very busy. We don't need to keep them. But two things that I have seen work really well is one thing, doing after the refinement session, doing a technical refinement, which might look like, the tech lead saying, okay, we know we have this piece, let's go look at the relevant code, let's kind of step through it together. It's almost like a mobbing design session, just so everybody kind of knows at least how to begin. And then another thing that I've seen on the team that I'm on currently actually is more on the after side, but it helps for the next refinement, is with big merge requests. We do kind of a merge review ceremony where all the developers come together and talk through the MR together. I've really been enjoying this, and I think it keeps that common understanding of different parts of the code together, even though you're not doing it before. So like I'd be more set up to take on a task that's kind of outside of my wheelhouse. So yeah, pet peeve is one person per domain, and then a couple ways to handle that are technical refinement or talking through changes really well as a team after they're made.
Awesome. Yeah, those the silos can happen pretty quickly within a team when people kind of feel like they own a little slice of the domain or the whatever platform you're working on, and it can be disastrous when that person either decides to go to a different opportunity or get sick or anything like that. So that definitely
and I personally, I love that feeling of ownership. So
yeah,
you gotta find some solution that really gives the developer an opportunity to dig in, but not at the cost of feeling like a team and being able to work like a team.
Yeah, that's a really good point. Another thing I like to do is kind of have someone who doesn't know it at least own that story. So they might not be the number one implementer on a piece of work, but they're the one who might be answering questions from outside teams, or their name is tied to that sliver just for, you know, just for a sprint, just to kind of get a feel for what that's like, yeah, in that kind of act of unifying, so that everybody knows a little bit, everyone feels engaged during the refinement, if that makes sense. Cool. All right, we can move on here to this next question. So this is around the Agile Manifesto, and like I said before, I know everyone works in different variations of this, and you might not even have an Agile kind of methodology in your workplace quite yet. However, one of the things in here I think applies to everyone no matter what. So the Agile Manifesto, just to refresh, is working software over comprehensive documentation, customer collaboration over contract negotiation, and responding to change over following a plan. So focusing on that last piece, responding to change over following a plan. Of course, being Agile means being able to deliver small pieces of code to production quickly, assess the impact, change direction if needed, depending on how that piece of software is working. So that's something we strive for. But sometimes in order to create a good architecture plan, or, you know, a concrete technical system, you do need to know some of the requirements and have some lead time, right? You got to kind of know what's going on to some degree before you build out something large, or you'll really be in a mess. So from your guys' point of view, how can the product team work with the development team to kind of strike a balance between that, responding to change while still providing the team enough time to deliver well-designed code? Christina, do you have any ideas on this one?
So I don't know that I can answer your question, but I can provide some like context around Agile and before Agile. So when I first started at the Navy, I was in a program that had existed for many decades. And so they were kind of in the middle of an Agile transformation, but previously they had undergone a transformation to waterfall. So there's kind of these three different stages that this organization had been in and had like strong institutional memory of, which is first the Wild West, right? Like something might get tested and then changed before it's delivered. And there's a lot of unknown. There's kind of by the seat of your pants approach to things. And then in response to that, obviously not working very well, they instituted kind of a waterfall approach, which is big design up front, which is kind of the topic of this question, right? Like, how do we handle big design? And then after design, that's kind of documented and transitioned to development. And then that's documented and transitioned to testing, so that you always know that testing happens last, and you always know kind of what the procedure is going to be. And so the problems then that introduces, although it has solved problems itself, and then also introduces more, the ones that it introduces are kind of a question of flexibility. If you do encounter something that throws your plan out the window, are you trying to like get back as close to the plan as soon as you can, or are you trying to do the best you can with what you have at that point? And so the Agile approach to that is to say, okay, we're going to work in blocks so that we don't get caught in a situation where the plan, you know, has to go out the window. So anyways, I have not answered your question, but I've given a little bit of context. And for actually executing that, I really do think it depends largely on having that lead time. So just having product folks be a little ahead of development and have their eye on what decisions we need to be making now so that we can be developing these things in a couple of weeks. But I would love to hear personally from Erin or from Hayley on how to execute that.
Yeah, I don't know if I have an exact answer either. It's an art, I think, and definitely a balance, and you got to figure it out. But I think you kind of hit on it. it's about balancing delivery, but also doing discovery continuously. And as a product manager and tech lead, I think mainly our main roles are to be looking ahead for the team and getting those questions answered and getting the next thing kind of ready. And then I think with Agile, just a comment, like I think there's a common misconception that Agile means there's no plan. And that's just like wild west, and there's just no plan. You just think there's no timelines, and you just deliver what you can when you can, and that's not the case, right? It's about knowing very well what you're going to be delivering in the near term and having an idea of the long term, and then quickly getting to market and getting your capability in production and getting users so you can learn if it solved the need, or sort of let it inform you of what's next. And yeah, so I think wanted to share that because I think I've heard it from people like in person that like, oh, it just means there's, you guys have no sense of time. Like I need dates, and it's like I can give you dates for the near term stuff, and then we'll work on the stuff that's further out.
Yeah, and I think it ties back to what we were saying before, Hayley, about the kind of like discovery or design sprint. Like, let the engineers kind of hear and then ask questions and do like their due diligence in terms of like creating the architecture they think is required, which I think we'll hear even more about that next with the data question. But that time to set things up and ask questions about this maybe isn't exactly right now, but finding that balance between building for now, but I'm thinking about tomorrow too, and asking those questions in the beginning. And the other big thing I wanted to point out on this is, as you're responding to change, like my big thing is, if you feel something is not right, like it's important to have an environment where everyone feels like they can speak up on something. If they're feeling like, if you're a developer and like you're having to do something kind of like the same thing every single day, and you're like, man, I kind of want to, like, this should really be automated or done in a different fashion, like, or this little piece of the architecture doesn't really make sense anymore. That's the response to change. Like but it relies on you to speak up about difficulties you're having or areas that you see aren't right, and like never sit there and think like, well, if the senior on the team hadn't said something, then there might not be something wrong. Like anyone, it's so important for everyone to like know that your voice matters and opinion counts so much, and ultimately you're going to be like saving people so much time and energy to at least bring it up, have that conversation. Anything else you want to add on that, Ramya?
Y'all have covered it really well, I think.
Yeah, well, this next question is definitely for you and for Hayley, a bit more directed. So talking about planning and requirements and that sort of thing, just how is the delivery life cycle different when it comes to a data project? What do you think is important for someone to take away when it comes to data work versus something that might be a bit more business logic-y? Data is just such a basis for a lot of other things to really work. So how do you guys navigate that?
Yeah, I think Erin, you hit on it. Like data is the foundation to everything. So it's super critical, and every feature pretty much has data. But I think with data, for me, kind of the challenge is that there's so many users of data. It's just so vast, and like even figuring out who your users are can be a challenge. And then you have to meet with them, right? And not like understand their needs. So whether it's an operational team building an application that's producing data, or it's an analytical environment and there's analysts querying the data, or there's data scientists, right? Or there may be machine learning models that are using this data. You really have to identify who your users are and then meet with them. And understand what they need from the data, how are they using it, to really try and make sure you can design appropriately. And then there's just a whole nother aspect of governance, right? When it comes to data, compliance folks use your data, and others, and understanding what's the source of truth for the data, right? Because data can be replicated in many different places. So like having a true lineage or like source of truth can be a challenge. So yeah, there's a whole lot of challenges. I don't know if I have great advice on how to overcome it, but I know working with Ramya, she's been in this a very long time, and I've seen her kind of work her magic. So I'll let Ramya kind of share some experience there.
Thanks, Hayley. Yeah. So I think one of the challenges that I see, especially like during road mapping, is the heavy dependencies on other teams, whether they're upstream or downstream, especially when it's part of a larger initiative, being able to, deliver and not be impeded by something that we're kind of waiting on upstream. Like, for example, I've been on a project where the operational team was still kind of figuring things out and changing things up. And so we kind of got into this like cycle of where we were just kind of making code changes just so that our previously delivered code didn't break. And then we're just, it kind of gets a little frustrating for the team that, hey, we're not really making progress on what we originally intended. We're just, trying to keep up, so to speak. So that's one of the challenges. And I think one was also, I think, just defining MVP, like from a product perspective. I was lucky to work with Hayley on a couple of projects, and I really appreciated kind of how she defined the MVP, like getting stakeholder buy-in, like of course speaking to users, all of that, but defining that MVP and planning on how we can iterate towards it, while also kind of defending that MVP, because it's data. Everyone wants, like Hayley mentioned, like everyone wants a piece of, or like, oh, you find some other use for it, or oh, if you did this would be great. But having her kind of push back and say like, hey, this is great, but is it a day one requirement? Is that something that we can maybe work on? Because it's it is, we get it that it's important and it's got this really cool use, but maybe that's something we can focus on once we've delivered this MVP. So that's something that I really appreciated. Hayley, do you want to talk a little bit more about that?
Yeah, I guess, yes. Thank you, Ramya. I think, I guess one tactic or way to solve it is really like going user by user, like, speaking with all of them up front so you can kind of get an idea of, how it needs to be designed architecturally. But then like for an MVP, you can really start to narrow in on one set of particular users or one particular use case, sort of end to end, and take that approach. I think that's worked well. And then Ramya was talking about the MVP. I think something that I really appreciated in our partnership was that Ramya would also question me, right, and push back on me, because I feel like people need to know that just because the product manager says we're going to go build this thing doesn't mean we should just jump and go do it. It's really a two-way street, and the team should be empowered to ask why, or to push back and say, do we really need to do this now? If we do, like, here's the trade-off, or here's what it's going to mean. It's going to take this long, or this other thing is going to be delayed. And so working with Ramya, I felt we just really had a transparent relationship where we could talk back and forth and just question each other in a productive way. And it really helped us stay like on track with our deliverables and our timelines, and be able to produce great results. So it was a great experience for me. And again, that healthy push in a relationship, I think, is really important.
Another thing for data projects, I think sometimes we get so abstracted away from end users. It's easy to kind of get lost in the technical details, but it's always really helpful to kind of join those, be a fly on the wall during the end user meetings where, you see how people are going to use whatever you're, it might not be a direct relation to what you're building, but it's always nice to see, how that end product and result will be used. I've spoken to people who like, oh wow, this kind of saved like 3 days or 3 days every month, and just having that kind of perspective help drive the project, even though we're just sometimes in the back end, not necessarily in the UI or visualization field, but that's helpful.
That's awesome. Yeah, I know in the past have kind of thought of like, oh, well, data is just, it's there and it's to use, but it's like awesome that, yeah, it makes perfect sense. You do want to see what that end user, it is designed and built for a particular reason, and kind of like narrowing that down, understanding who's going to be using it. That's awesome. It's like an art form in and of itself to plan, design, and build out a data architecture of any kind. It's awesome. I have a feeling we might get some questions about that at the end. Okay, my next question here is, so these last two are kind of out there, open-ended, but so kind of like whether it's the beginning, middle, or end of a project of any kind, what do you guys think is the biggest or most common challenge just across the board when it comes to delivering software in any degree, and obviously sort of around working with a product and tech team, harmonizing between the two? What do you think is the biggest or most common challenge, either show-stopping challenge or something you've seen in multiple teams before that can kind of be tough to overcome? Anybody can take this one.
For me, something that I've seen is just team dynamics. I feel like that can really make or break a delivery. And I think Erin and both Erin and Hayley kind of touched on it earlier about, having that transparency, having that healthy pushback, feedback, and leveraging that feedback to kind of improve things within a team. It's not just improving the technical delivery, which is important, but it's also about how the team kind of delivers together, and product, tech, everyone together. That's something that I've seen. Yeah,
that's awesome. Yeah, kind of what I was hinting at there is like that harmonizing thing, and sort of like the product, ideally you have someone in product who's on your team, like who's part of your team, your peer, you're working with them pretty consistently, and that can be a really fun experience to like work through that relationship and deliver. A pretty common thing I've seen is kind of like shoulder tapping type of work, and whether it's from product or from like a tech lead on the team, I know that would drive me insane to have my days kind of dictated by like, hey, can you look into, of course, like things like that come up and they can't wait. But sort of like, that's probably one of the most common things I've seen, and to overcome it is really, like I said before, speaking up, hey, this may not be a sustainable way of working. I don't feel like I have the time to really look into these issues when we're planning, for 2 weeks, and a lot of stuff comes in the middle. Having that open line of communication is so important. And it is really fun when you get into like a good flow, and you plan out and you deliver, and questions and yeah. What do you have in mind for this, Hayley?
Yeah, I mean, just kind of adding on to what you were saying, I think the shoulder tap thing is real. I also feel like we do it maybe without realizing that we're doing it. And so it's important, like you were saying, to speak up and just let that person know that it's disruptive, or that like, does this really need to happen now? And just talk about the better way to like bring in new work or new ideas and things like that so that it's less disruptive. But I honestly think it's in good faith. People probably do it without realizing that they're doing it. And so just, being honest with them about it, I think is great way to go about it. And they can take that feedback and improve.
Are these kind of one-on-one conversations, like sidebar conversations that you would have, or do you also use like the larger forums like retrospectives? I'm just curious.
To give that kind of feedback?
Yes.
Ooh, that's a good question. I would probably say it in a larger forum if it's happening like team-wide. So sometimes it's a culture of that, and it's not necessarily like, oh, that person is always shoulder tapping, but it's more like that's how work gets done. I would bring that up, and that's what I would imagine. I mean, that's what I see more often, is that it's a kind of a cultural thing, but that that's not like necessarily sustainable, and it can lead to like unhealthy work habits. So that's where I would bring it up in a retro, or, you know, some sort of team introspective meeting where you're looking at your processes and kind of saying, hey, you know, I spent a lot of time kind of doing this, that, the other. Maybe we should try to set aside, you know, make a list or have some way to kind of track that if it's causing your days to kind of get longer.
Yeah, I agree with that. Especially if it's not like a personal problem, it's more of just like a how we work, like team thing. And I think if you bring it up in a way that's not like attacking, you know, then in a group forum, and again, if we're a team and we're, you know, all comfortable with each other and working well together, like I think it's kind of no issue to bring something like that up in a group setting.
Yeah, definitely relies on that. Having a team that is comfortable with each other, open lines of communication, trust, like those are all super important, I think. Yeah, this highlights how important that is to the success of the project, really.
Yeah.
Awesome. All right, last question that I have before we open it up. And again, this is kind of open-ended, but we talked about a lot of different things here tonight. So when you look at your experiences defining product scope, delivering on those expectations, what would you say is one piece of advice either you were given by someone or you have to provide authentically, kind of one word to the wise to leave everybody with here tonight? What would that be? Anybody want to start?
I'll go. I'll go, Christina. Please, you go.
All right, I guess I got myself into this. So I went to a conference a couple of years ago, and I remember just leaving with this whole new understanding of prioritization. I think it was a couple different talks that I went to, but I just came out of it really understanding that priority is not linear, low, medium, high. There are some features that have to be there, or else the thing is completely useless, and doing any more work on them once they're there is equally useless. There are other things like maybe performance stuff where continued work means continued utility. And there are other things where just a little bit of work can be magic for the users. And so those are all totally, you know, apples and oranges when you're prioritizing. And another kind of way of looking at that is, or at prioritization is, you know, some things are new features, some things are regulatory requirements with deadlines, some things are technical debt or complexity debt that has been hanging around over your head. And all of those things are important. And, you know, you can, within those, you can kind of stack, okay, this is our most important piece of technical debt. But I am so impressed by product managers and product owners when they really are able to juggle all of those different types of important things. And yes, so I was just like, in awe of product when I came out of that conference, and just understanding prioritization as a really complex problem. All right, Hayley, now it's your turn.
Thank you. Yeah. And you're right about that. It is very difficult, but very important, right? And just a little on that, like I think you shouldn't have more than one top priority, right? Like I think that's a common thing that I've seen or heard, and I think it's just very distracting and confusing for a team to tell them that there's more than one top priority, right? But I guess like my piece of advice would be like communicate often and early all throughout, like whether it's with your team or with your stakeholders, like communication is key. So, you know, as we're building, as we're learning, things evolve, our timelines may be growing, our complexity is growing, right? But like when we find that, I think it's important to discuss it as a team and like really understand like what does this mean, what are the impacts, should we keep going, do we need to pivot, and like let's bring that up and talk about it early. Also with stakeholders, like just being honest and open with them about like, hey, we found this thing, here's what it means, or here's what I recommend. Just letting you know, be aware, and get their input, and just continuously do that. I think especially with stakeholders, like in product, we have so many stakeholders that we're managing. And it's just really important to communicate often and early. We don't want to get to the end and there's unpleasant surprises about what they were expecting the product to look like or the value it was, you know, supposed to bring. So it's important to just, you know, be in constant communication along the way, and partner for those great results. Ramya?
I'll go with done is better than perfect. That's something I struggle with and I try to keep in mind. And I think it helps me, especially like when we're working agile, just having that in the back of my head that yes, done is better than perfect. But yeah.
Awesome. Thanks, everyone. My little piece is, I know Hayley will love this. Come to refinement with energy. Like come to those planning sessions with your whole self, with energy. I worked with a consultant actually from another company, and she used to just always start with, okay, everyone have their coffee, their water, they have what they need. Just kind of got us off to a like, okay, let's jump in here. Like, who has questions that we can work through, and kind of make it an upbeat thing. It's easy to look at it as like a chore. I know as the developer, we can kind of think, oh, I don't want to think about, but it's essential. And coming to it with energy makes it just more fun, and it makes your own life easier with development and delivery later.
Yeah, I do love that, right? And
Yeah.
it's so important. It's the way to get like all the team's input, right, on the scenarios and what we're building, and asking all those questions. I know, you know, I was on a project where we would get in refinement and half the team was on their laptop, like coding stories, and we'd be like, you know, guys, laptops down, like we really need to focus on this, because you know, at the end of it, you don't want to walk away and like not know what the story is about, and then like pick it up in a couple of days and be totally lost from a product and tech perspective. So it's easy to do, to multitask, and you know, we all have a lot to get done, but I love that advice, Erin, to come to refinement energized and like ready to participate and get ready. Thanks.
I think that's a great point, Hayley, about, you know, having your laptop closed. And it's even harder now, right? Like Slack messages are unavoidable even while you're in meetings. And so just kind of making sure that you're focused is a challenge, but worth doing.
Yeah. Okay. Awesome. So that concludes the kind of staged questions that I had for this evening. So right at 7 o'clock too. Wow. So yeah, we have some time now. If anybody You can come on or off camera, whatever you want. I think we've got a good amount here. So if somebody wants to jump on and ask a question, that would be great, or post something in the chat here. I see we have had some chatter during our talk.
No, you're not. You're not fooling us, Roman. You're not shy.
If your what you hoped to learn has not been answered, feel free to repaste that in the chat, and we'll handle those as they come up too.
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
So I've heard a lot about trust and having a good atmosphere. So are there some tricks to build that trust that you guys can share?
Definitely.
I will disappear. Okay.
Yeah, I think we can definitely talk on building trust. I think like it's definitely amongst the technical team. It might it may or may not come easily, but that's a little bit more of a known. But building that trust between the product side and the tech team is probably where there's a bit more, there may be a bit more of a challenge because of intentions, even like what Christina was saying about, well, we have tech stuff that we want to do, and then there's business stuff that we want to do. So kind of competing interests there. But to me, I think that can be used as a real positive. So like building trust to me is speaking your truth to the person. So, you know, like right off the bat, kind of in a non-confrontational way, but voicing what you think should be what we work on next. It is a give and take, a back and forth between the tech team and the product. And I think being honest and open, vocal, those are things that like do build trust, because you don't have to guess at what the person is thinking. You don't have to try and think like, oh, you know, I don't really know what that person's feeling right now, so I don't necessarily feel I can say what I want to say because I don't know if they're saying what they want to say. So I think, at least for me, it's not always the answer, but being honest and open, like in those team settings, can really go a long way to quickly get you that back and forth, get you that trust between product and tech.
Yeah, I think something that I try and do is just build a personal relationship with my team members. Like, I think for me, that's the easiest way to build trust, is just to like get to know each of the team members on a personal level. So that's something I've always done. It also just, for me, makes work more fun when you like actually have that kind of relationship. So yeah, that's usually what I do, is get to know my team members, and then, you know, also kind of just recognizing when people are open and honest about things and being like, hey, I really appreciated that, you know, like just being outward about that to kind of reassure them that that's cool. Like that's what I want us to do, is to have that like open dialogue and trust. But yeah, it's built over time for sure.
So Hayley is what we call a parrot, which means that she is a people person. So of course, building trust with Hayley is about knowing her personally. I would offer, for people working with people who don't necessarily value personal relationships at work, one way to build trust is to clearly state what you're going to do and then do it. Because that will build your reputation with that person. That will make them know that they know that you know that they value things actually happening, and that you will do that for them. So just, I totally agree with Hayley. I'm also a parent, but when you're in situations where that won't work for someone.
Yeah, I love that. Great advice.
Just to piggyback off of that question, have you guys found that process has changed, like being fully virtual in this environment, and obviously remote work and things like that are becoming more and more the norm? How has that process changed for you, as like in the wake of that shift?
Yeah, it's definitely been tough. And something I definitely talk about with these people here and the other managers at Ippon is kind of how to gain trust when you're not in person necessarily. And I think taking the time to do like either a quick, like not being afraid to do a quick like 15-minute check-in with someone, kind of like what Hayley was saying, like a one-on-one is so natural in the office. You walk up to someone and like people expect you to walk up to them sometimes, like when you're in an office setting. So like to kind of make that happen virtually is like messaging saying, hey, like I do have a quick question when you have time, or even let's catch up, let's do a 15-minute coffee so I can kind of understand like where you're from. I'm joining a new team right now at Capital One, and I have reached out to a couple different people just to say like, hey, like, you know, hate to call it like a meet and greet, but really that's what it is I don't want to just assume we're just going to like start working together and you're just going to trust everything I say. Like, where did you work before? Like, how did you come to be on this team? And sort of what are your interests? And just taking that like deliberate effort to have a 15-minute coffee, just quick touch base virtually. Definitely it took me several months to like kind of realize that was going to be helpful, but that's kind of what I've been doing lately. I don't know if anyone else has any other tips for that.
I think we're all slowly reading Kelly's comment. That's
Yeah,
very good. And I would recommend that you read it also.
Yes. The comment is protecting the developers from in-sprint changes or allow them to do a POC before we work on a new functionality. Also asking them what they would do to improve the code of the application when you do planning helps to show you respect their time and their opinion. I think that's awesome. And yeah, and reminds me too, a big part of the trust is asking someone else questions, even if it's an area like you know they'll know the answer, that then it lets them know that you know that they're an expert in it and you are deliberately, you know, going to that person for that reason. I think builds trust big time. Thank you so much, Kelly. Well, are there any other questions or anything? We can scroll back up, anything that wasn't quite answered that anyone is interested about hearing from us tonight.
Hi, so I have one question, one directed at Hayley from her perspective, and then for the tech side. One of the problems I've seen often is product tries to design the technical solution. So how do, as a product person, you step back from that, and how as a tech person do you protect the technical solution?
Oh, that's a good one, Ben. You're asking me to stay in my lane. No, I think yes, it can be hard to do. Like even for me, like I came from a operations background, knew nothing about tech when I entered into the role, but doing it now for 6+ years, I've adapted, right? And I know a lot more about technology and I can follow a technical conversation and I do get excited about the solution, right? But it's really important. I love what Christina said, like out of the solution space, back into the problem space, like that's where I provide the most value, is really going deep in that area and being able to articulate the problems and like what the needs are and why why we need to do this, or why, you know, a certain experience needs to be a certain way for a user, and really going deep in that area. So yeah, I think, you know, it also goes to how you write your stories, right? Like when you write stories, it should not be prescriptive to like the solution you're looking for, right? It needs to really be about like the outcomes, or like, yeah, from a user perspective, like what they need, and not dictating exact, you know, being too prescriptive is not good. You know, we need to let our engineers be super creative, and again, just give them the what and the why, and empower them to find the right solution. So it's, again, I think it is a struggle as you've been in product more, to kind of like stay in your lane. Or if you became a product manager in your previous role, you might have been a business analyst or a developer, you know, like we come from very different backgrounds into the product role. So I think it may be harder for some than others to get out of that solution space and into the problem space, but that's really what we need to constantly remind ourselves in order to be a good product manager. So, do you other ladies want to talk about kind of the technology perspective there?
I can talk a little. I was just thinking about how we go back to the whole honesty, being open and transparent, and having those honest conversations. It can be difficult conversations, but we need to have them. We all have our strengths and our skill sets, and sometimes we have experience as well. But kind of having that, you know, the ability and that trust to speak to that, hey, I do know what I'm doing. Our team knows what we're doing and can come up with something. And those are great ideas, and maybe we can consider some, but how we do it is, you know, kind of it's our sandbox kind of thing. But, and it again comes back, at least for me, it comes back to being able to trust and have that line of communication.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. And I also think what really helps here is kind of having like team expectations written out that everyone can see. So like when we go to do our planning or refinement session, whatever you want to call it, like this is for clarifying requirements, knowing sort of like what's the business intent, kind of getting those stories crafted in a way of like what are we doing, what's going to be demoable at the end, you know, asking those kind of questions, have that written out, like this is what this time is for, and then that way if you're an engineer and things are starting to get into the how, and you feel that's not the right setting, you can kind of say, hey, like let's true back to our team norms or our expectations. We're not working on the how right now, we're working on the what, and that can be like a simple, like I think setting expectations, team norms written out is super important to keep those, you know, because yeah, obviously everybody, it's fun to kind of dip your toe and say, oh, you know, yeah, and like that can be good, and not that product needs to be completely isolated from that, but having something written out, cheering back is can be helpful if it gets to be too much, I think.
We love a code of conduct, right? Yeah, and I just wanted to add to this discussion, it sounds like a lot of it is about asking those why questions, and I would just offer that asking why questions can be good also in terms of process. I've been in environments where there has been a lot of very prescriptive process, and if you ask why about those as well, you might find some ways to break those chains a little bit. If you can give the stakeholder another way of meeting their true objective that's behind their rule that they've set for you. I recommend it. It's great.
Awesome. Yeah, it's a good point. All right. We're just about at time anyways, but does anyone else have anything else they want to ask about tonight? Awesome. And if you do think of anything, I think all of us will put our email in the chat to share. So if you think of something later on or want to reach out and chat about anything, all four of us are pretty open. So we'll put some contact info in and hope to hear from you all. Thanks everybody so much for joining us this evening. This was really fun.
Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.
Have a great night.
You too.
I don't want to be the first to send my email because I actually don't remember how they end. Can one of you send it? I only ever remember the Ippon.fr one. Thank you. That's what I thought.
Thank you to all of you
Awesome.
guys for joining us tonight too. This is an awesome panel, and we haven't been focusing too much on products, so it's really great to kind of see how both of those worlds kind of intertwine, and obviously how important they are to like success for any development team, any type of development team. So thank you guys. And then I would also just add, like, anybody who has any other questions, just general questions, if you want to hang on for a couple of minutes, feel free, and we'll hang around for a few more minutes after.
Thank you, Melissa. Big thanks to Women Who Code.
Woo. I know. I can't wait to have in-person events again when I can see you guys in person. Also come to see your awesome office I've heard a lot about.
Yes, we will definitely be hosting once we are back safely, can be back safely in person. We're excited for that.
Yeah. Well, great. Thank you, everybody. Feel free to stay on if you have a question. If not, feel free to drop. But thanks for joining tonight. I'm going to go ahead and stop our recording for now.